my crafty people, this is Stephanie again. We're going to do another dress, and this time it is for my other granddaughter. I have two granddaughters and a grandson, and she's obviously a little older, she's a little bigger. So I'm going to be doing this same pattern that we did for my little granddaughter, but I'm going to make this in the small. It's a couple of steps up from the last one I made, and I have found what I think might be the perfect dress. So I'm going to show you the dress, and then we're going to get started cutting it up and figuring out how it fits. And this is the great reveal. Now, this is a dress. It's got a nice it's a navy blue eyelet, white eyelet, light little flowers, and it's got a nice border, which we are going to use, no hems. And it's got these cute little sleeves. Again, I think we're going to avoid hems, but we're not even going to put elastic in these because they're going to be cute and flouncy. It's made almost exactly the same way we're going to make this dress. It's kind of a pilgrim style where the sleeves come into the bodice. So it should be perfect. I thrifted it for, I think, $7, $6.99. So one of my pricier thrifts. I'm going to get started. I'm going to cut up the sides just like I normally do, all the way through the sleeves, so we can separate the pieces to the front from the back and make it easier to lay out our pattern. I'll be right back, and we're going to lay out our pattern and start cutting away. Again, we're just cutting up the sides, and I wanted to show you all this real quick. I'm using the seam that's already here, following it up and all the way up through the sleeve. We're going to cut through the top of the sleeve. This gives us a opening for our pattern to be laid out. So now I have the whole dress laid out, and as you'll notice, it looks just like our little dress, the way it fits together, the two sleeves, the front and the back. So we're just downsizing it for my granddaughter. Now, I am going to go ahead and cut the sleeves off, and again, that'll make it easier for us to lay out the pattern. So I'm going to follow the seam. Off. So we're deconstructing a dress that is a larger size of what we're going to be constructing. But it would have been expensive for me to get this fabric, especially with this beautiful little ridge and everything, the scalloped edge. It would have been very expensive for me to get this fabric. I'm also going to cut this elastic off. It had 3 lines of elastic, and you'll see that in the before pictures. And I just pulled those out so I can stretch out and make sure I've got enough fabric for the pattern. Okay, this was a little challenging, and I'm going to show you what I did. This particular pattern, the fabric wasn't quite wide enough for the width of this dress at the bottom. And remember, the most important part about this dress is making sure that these side seams match. So, with these side seams matching and the hem where the hem would be, the end of the dress, fall perfectly, you have it right up to the edge of the fabric. So I needed to push it this way a little, and I can do that with this particular pattern because this collar is elastic. So I can choose to make it fuller or less full, I guess, with the elastic. And you also got to figure when we do it with the buttons in the front, that is probably a button's worth of placket anyway, space-wise. So we're going to make this work. I just wanted to show you that again. You'll see right here that it just does come to the very edge, and we have to make sure that seam meets this one and that these little ends will meet. I think we've got it, so I'm going to finish cutting this out, and then we're going to probably go to the serger. One more thing I am doing with this particular dress that I usually don't do with the shirts, because the shirts have the buttons down the front, they're easy to tell front and back. This fabric is typical eyelet. It's so close to front and back, it really wouldn't matter if you if you messed up and put front to back on this, even on the edging. But what I thought I might do to make it easy for my granddaughter to know front and back is, I know this is the back of the sleeve because I went back and looked at the pattern. So I took the washing instruction tag out of the original dress and I've pinned it to the back of the dress. And this is, I did both of them right sides together. So I know all of these are turned right side in and wrong side out. I'm going to sew this tag into this dress when we put the casing in for the neck, and that will hopefully help her know front and from back. I'm not sure if it's going to make a huge difference. It does look a little different. Obviously there's a different length in it and everything, so I think it will be necessary. But it's just a trick you can do if you have this scenario where all the fabric looks the same front and back and you don't have a defined front with that button placket or an embroidery piece. Okay, we're back at the serger, or at the serger for the first time today. And what we're going to do is serge the sleeves on, and we're starting with the front. So this is the front of the dress. I know it's the front of the dress because I put the washing tag on the back, and I made sure that I followed the wrong sides to wrong side, right side to right side thing. So these are facing right sides together, and it's going to be hard to see until I get it finished, but we're going to start right here in this seam. Remember the seam that attaches the sleeve to the body. When you're sewing this, you want to make sure that this part where the hem usually would be, or our little eyelet fringe is, you want to make sure this corner right here with the dress is matched up really well, because your neck, because you're putting elastic in it, it could be off by a little teeny tiny bit. But it's better to have this particular seam right on. Now I am putting my fabric directly underneath my presser foot, and I'm using the edge of my presser foot where the blade is as a guide. Most patterns have a 5/8 inch seam allowance. When I use my serger, the seam allowance ends up being a little less than 5/8, but as long as you're consistent and you make that the same seam allowance throughout, then you won't have any problems with fitting. And these are little kids' clothes, so they tend to be a little simpler. So I'm not going to take any fabric off. I'm just going to run my fabric right underneath that presser foot. I mean, you may take a little tiny bit off, but that's not going to hurt it. Just keep making sure that your pattern is lined up, your seam is lined up. And honestly, this particular fabric is a little tricky. So we're just going to keep it lined up here. And a little bit of my material is being shaved off, but it's not even probably 1/8 of an inch. Just take your time, cut it, and now what we've done is we've attached the sleeve to the body of the dress. It's harder to see this one because it's bigger than the last one. So we're going to attach the other sleeve to the other side. Now this pattern has notches that you can cut out on the sleeve and on the front and back. The good thing about this particular one though, when you match up the wrong sides, one is longer than the other, so you know you've got the wrong sides matched up. So I don't usually use the notches on this pattern. And when I do cut notches, I always cut them out, not in. Sorry. Now we're going to, again, match up this corner where the sleeve and the bodice meet. It's going to be right there. Put that under the presser foot, just at the edge of the presser foot. And we're going to seam around. Check and make sure we've got everything lined up. This is a typical eyelet. It's very soft, very pliable. So it's both easy to get off track and easy to get back on track. So now I have the two sleeves attached to the front, and we're going to attach the side, the back that we pinned our wash tag on, and we know that's on the wrong side, so this is the side I'm going to push towards the right side to right side, right side to right side, and you'll see that this particular seam fits, so we know we've got the right one. Again, I want to make sure that this corner meets properly so I don't have a lot of issues trying to sew up the side seam. It would also be helpful if I was hemming the sleeves, which we're not. We are taking a big shortcut there along with the hem because of that fringe. Add the last sleeve, or the sleeve to the side, the back side for the last seam. Make sure everything's still in line. We're going to line up this corner here and seam away. I did not realize when I bought this dress that I would be pretty much remaking it in the same form it already was in. Puts our dress sleeves to back and front. So now we're just going to zip up the sides, and we can do that fortunately because we're not hemming it and we're not putting anything in the sleeve. So the only thing we'll have left after this is our casing, which is for the neck elastic. So I am going to line up this this seam on the side. Same thing, we're going to put it underneath the serger. Now I am going to make sure that I pull out all of my serger ravels over here, the seams, the draw off, and that way I'll catch them in this particular process.
have to worry about knotting or sewing them back in or anything else. Make sure your seams from your front and back are matching up. Alright, we've got that started. Now we want to make sure everything's still straight. Pull our little ravels out. And that just takes off those. Your seams straight. And we're almost done with the first side. Sew down the second side and go to the sewing machine, make our casing for our elastic. We are done. That's the speed you can get out of these little dresses. Alright, so last seam on the serger. Hitches out here. There we go. Go to the sewing machine and put our casing in. Okay, now we're at the sewing machine and we're going to use single fold bias tape. And what it looks like, it looks like this, and it folds out. It's got a fold on each side like that, right there. It's hard to see. Anyway, this is going to be, it's sold like this, single fold bias tape. I'm using a kind of an ivory creamy color because the flowers on the fabric are kind of ivory. I also am using black thread because I don't have any navy, but this is a nice dark color and I don't think the black will show up as much as, say, a cream color. But we're going to sew this bias tape right on to the right side of the collar. So we're going to turn it inside out. Okay. And we're going to sew it onto the right side of the collar. And we're going to sew it with this fold line, one of the fold lines, open, right up against the edge of this collar. And what that's going to allow us to do is we're going to sew right in that fold line, and when we're done, we'll turn it over and it will become our 1/4 inch, our casing for our 1/4 inch elastic. So it doesn't take much. This is a 1/2 inch single fold bias tape. I'm going to start in the back of the dress, and I know this is the back of the dress again because I've still got that pin there. And once we go to turn this over to the wrong side, then I'll slip that tag in underneath the bias tape. So we're going to start right here in the middle of the back, or in general that spot, because if you have any, when you overlap and then run your elastic, you want that in the back. It's just won't be bulky in the front, and you'll be able to you won't have to look at it. It won't be visible from the front. So I'm going to start here, and I'm going to show you a few minutes of how I'm sewing that, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to rerun the elastic. Now we're ready to sew on our single fold bias tape. we're going to be butting it up right against the edge of the fabric, right against the edge of the fabric itself, and we're going to be sewing in the fold line. Now, I've adjusted, or I'm going to adjust my needle on my machine to be right in that fold line. Okay. It's kind of hard to do because it's very light fabric, but it's going to, I'm going to put my presser foot over to the far right where it's meeting as close as it can to the edge, and it'll fall right in that fold line for sewing. Now of course I start out with a couple of stitches and I backspace a couple because that's how I learned. And you just want to make sure that you keep that fabric and that bias tape together, edge to edge, right under your presser foot. With your seam going down the fold that's opened up. You have opened up that fold so you can fold it over the top of your fabric. And this is how it's going to go for a little while, so I will come back when I've got this done. Now when I ended my bias tape at where I started it, I overlapped it about 1/4 of an inch, but I kept sewing, so it overlaps the original starting point by about 1/4 of an inch again, and I back stitched over it. I'm going to clip it another 1/4 of an inch away from that stitching, and what we'll do is when we finish this, I'm going to sew over the edge of that bias tape and catch my elastic all at once so it won't be very bulky. And as you'll see now, what we're going to do is we're going to turn that in to the wrong side, and that's going to make a neat little casing for our elastic. So what we'll do, I'll get all my extra casing out of the way, is we'll come over here to the machine. We will fold over our bias tape, and I'm going to start sewing it down. And I'm actually going to start away from this area where we've got them meeting. I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch over away from this, because this is going to be our opening to slip the elastic in. So we're just going to come over here. I'm going to start about 1/4 of an inch away from that place where where the bias tape is meeting. And again, what we're trying to do is we want to make sure we've got enough room for our 1/4 inch seam allowance. A 1/4 inch elastic. So I'm going to take my needle, I'm going to use my presser foot again as my guide, and I'm going to put this bias tape directly under the edge of my presser foot, and then I'm going to adjust my needle position as far over to the left as possible, so I will only catch the edge of that bias tape, leaving me as much room as possible for that 1/4 inch elastic to be run through there. You want it roomy, but not too big. You just want it to be comfortable to run through there. And of course we always start with a forward and back stitch, and I am just running along trying to make sure that this is tight up against the edge of my fabric. I'm just running across a little flower on the eyelet that it didn't like, and I'm also making sure that I'm running along the edge of the bias tape as close as possible so I don't end up with any small casing where it's tight to get the elastic through. I'm going to finish this and then we'll come back and run the elastic. Now we have all the casing in. Ouch. Put myself with a safety pin. And it's all turned to the inside of the little dress. So I cut a 20-inch piece of elastic. I'm pretty sure I won't need that much, but I honestly can't remember the last time what I did with this particular size. So what I've done, cut me a 20-inch piece. I'm going to fold over the tip of my elastic just to make it a little stronger, and I'm going to insert my safety pin in it like that, and I'm going to go into the little hole that we left open in the back where the two pieces of bias tape meet, and I'm going to run this elastic, and it's a push and pull. Running elastic is just coordination. Usually not my strong point, but I can run elastic. So we're just pulling. Now remember, as you're pulling, the other end is disappearing back there, so you make sure, hold on to it so you don't have to start over again. Because I have pulled it all the way through and had to start all over again. So we're just kind of trying to shift that fabric down that line of elastic. And we'll be able to even it out in a little bit when we're finished. I'm just going to push this last piece out. Now we've got the safety pin out. And what I like to do is add the other end of my elastic to this pin. That way I've got everything all clumped together, and that way it won't go back through. And that gives me an opportunity to kind of stretch, see how much elastic I don't need. And I probably don't need a lot of this. So, got it like this. Now I'm going to pull this elastic once again. This time I'm going to pull it from the side that's not so gathered. Take a look. Now remember, this is the only opening to go over the head. There's not a button or a zipper or snaps or anything like that. So I want it to be easy to go over her head, but not too big that it bags off of her little shoulders. So I think that's about it. You can use some of their clothing that they're already wearing to help you gauge a neckline like this. If that helps, by all means use whatever you can. I have done that before. Don't let your elastic go. So, and make sure, or try to make sure, that it doesn't turn on you. So I think it's turned on me. There we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this down with this piece over the top of it. So now I have the bottom piece under here that is long enough to meet the top piece. It's kind of complicated to see. And I'm going to fold that other piece of bias right over it. Now I can feel that I've got the top piece of elastic and the bottom piece of elastic on top of each other. And I know, I think I need to pull this a little. I think that's the neckline we want. So I'm going to just come over here. Again, I'm going to check, always double check. Make sure all of your elastic is lined up on top of itself. I'll put my needle to the center point. And I'm going to run it over this elastic and the biased casing. I'm just making a single line. Now what I've done is I've captured the bottom piece elastic, the top piece elastic, and I'm going to trim this really close inside that bias tape. Now that bias tape will fray a little bit, but if you take another stitch beside it, beside the edge where it's fraying, you'll keep it from going. You can put a zigzag on it, but I'm just going to put a single stitch, and I'm also going to close up the bottom of that casing. So you might have to pull a little when you're doing that because the elastic's inside now, so it's going to give you a little stretch, but that's okay. Now, we completely forgot to add a tag that I never add. So I'm going to stitch that in right now. This is the washing instructions. And again, it's really there so she can tell what the front is to the back of her dress. Now, in a perfect world, I would have put that right under the bias tape, but I forgot. Good thing is these tags are made not to fray, so it won't cause her any problems. This was the tag that was actually on the side of the dress. You know, a lot of your washing instructions are on the side. So now we've put in the tag. I'm going to cut all these nice little pennants. Whoop. There was one. And these on the back. And I think the black thread worked out just fine because it's such a dark navy. It's one of those things that you have to be in the right light to even figure out that it's black thread. So let's go back to the cutting table and we'll look at the dress as a whole. Here is our final little dress. Again, it's just a smaller version of what I started out with, but this one's going to fit my eldest granddaughter. It's got the washing instructions in the collar, and that's more for her to know what the right side is to the wrong side since there's no real detail to the front and back. And there we go. Smaller version of what we started out with. But we didn't have to hem it. And we didn't have to do anything to the sleeves. We could have run elastic along here behind this pretty little fringe and made them kind of ruffly, but I think they're going to look just fine without any ruffle. The fringe is really pretty. So this is her new play dress. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. I'm trying to get faster and better at this. If you have any comments or suggestions, please let me know. Like, subscribe, and we'll see what we make next time. Thanks.